god's wood of the Red Keep was a thin thing, a garden that remembered it had once been wild. The heart tree was not a heart at all, but a weirwood stump, its pale bark polished smooth by centuries of southern sun, its face excised long ago by men who feared northern eyes upon them. A thin skin of leaves quivered in some breeze that the city streets never felt. Beneath that small, civilized canopy, Eddard Stark stood with his hand against the wood and listened to the slow creak of branches and the distant tide of voices, a clamor that rose along the city walls and ran down to the quays. There was salt in the air, and smoke and onion, and horse, and 1,000 petty lives pulsing against stone. It was not Winterfell. In the half-light, the gods would seemed like a memory he was trying to keep from dissolving. Boots crunched on gravel. Jory Castle materialized from between the hedges, cloak open and sword belted, as if duty could be left to hang upon his hip whenever he wished. He stopped 3 paces off and bowed. "My lord," he said, "you have a caller." Eddard did not turn. "I have many. This one is Lannister." Jory's mouth made a line that wanted to smile. "The small one. He came without a retinue and with something like respect, if you can imagine it. He said he would wait." "The gods have humor, then." Ned's hand left the weirwood, and he looked past Jory at the path where torchlight wobbled like coins tossed into a dark brook. "Bring him." Tyrion Lannister came hobbling with his walking stick tangling vines and his eyes bright as candle flame. The gods would made him look smaller, and then you saw the skull and thought of a book crammed with sharp pages. He inclined his head. "Lord Stark." Ned studied the man who had stood under Winterfell's snows and sketched a saddle for a broken boy with hands careful as a septon's. "Lord Tyrion." "Only Tyrion, unless you require ceremony of me as well as truth." He tapped the stick lightly. "I had a mind to say something vulgar about the scent of this place, but I suppose it is the only square of ground in the city where a man might breathe without swallowing someone else's lies." "You came to breathe?" "I came because it is late, and when men ask to see you in daylight, it is often for the pleasure of being seen. At night, it is for better reasons." His eyes flicked to Jory and back. "May we speak where the hedges are higher, and your man pretends not to hear us?" Ned motioned, and Jory receded like a shadow taught good manners. He and the dwarf walked side by side along the little pool that mirrored a bare wedge of the moon. "Your visit surprises me," Ned said. "I could say the same. Here you are, out of your cold god's wood and into this warm one." Tyrion prodded the ground with his stick as if to test if earth in the south was as treacherous as its men. "Your son is a clever boy. I should like to see him ride. Did he like my saddle?" "He has not yet ridden it. He spends hours tracing its straps and buckles with his fingers as if he would read it." Ned felt the familiar ache of wanting to bring Winterfell into his chest and keep it there. "He dreams of it, and dreams are good bread for a boy who must not learn to eat bitterness too young. Dreams are also convenient food for men who would starve their enemies." Tyrion glanced at him sideways. "I was told you had a taste for straight roads, Lord Stark, where one can see every traveler coming. So let us try one." "Speak, then." "Your king is dying." Tyrion's voice was matter-of-fact, a knife lying flat on a table. "All the kitchens in the Red Keep know it now. He bleeds wine and boasts to trees that cannot answer, and a boar is fed with the heart of a man who is not yet dead. The city is a row of shutters about to fly open in a storm." Ned had not known how hunger and fear could be the same in the gut until this city taught him. But he nodded only once. And my sister has the louder voice," Tyrion said. "When shutters open, folk look to the biggest lantern. You came to tell me that Cersei will set Joffrey on the throne and break the law with the sweetness of a mother's smile? I do not require a lantern to see that. You require a friend who does not wear a mockingbird or a spider or a stag." The dwarf leaned against his stick and looked up carefully. "I am not your friend, and yet we may find that friendship is a useful accident when one's own house is a cliff with loose stones and your house is a wall without mortar." Ned let silence sit between them. He heard the drip of the pool's little fountain, the creak of branch on branch, a distant shout where some brawl was beginning. He thought of the 3 children who were not Roberts and would be whipped forward by their mother's will until they ran into steel. He thought of Stannis on Dragonstone, stern as a winter field. He thought of Littlefinger's easy smile and his own unease in its shadow. "Say plainly what you intend," he said. Tyrion smiled without joy. "Let us sit a boy from Dragonstone on the throne, and keep my father out of the city while we do it. Let us send your pretty blue-eyed daughter safely north, and not allow her to be hung from the walls along with the last of my family's honor. Let us have enough coin to bribe the only men who matter when princes argue, those who hold pikes for a living. You ask me to bribe the city watch. I offer to show you how. If it consoles your conscience, tell yourself it is not bribery but wages paid in advance and above their station to ensure industry and loyalty." He shrugged. "They will not call it bribery. They will call it meat for their children and a better scabbard. You speak of the law like a man who knows its narrow alleys. I was raised in a keep whose lord taught me that law is a net with holes placed just where a clever hand may slip through." His eyes gleamed. "And I was raised with a sister who thinks nets are for throwing over men like you. My honor is not a net. No, my lord, it is a tower built in a city that prefers tents. The wind will pull and the ropes will fail and the hammering will not cease. You might yet dwell in your tower, but you will need a shrewd steward to keep the ladders oiled. And you would be that steward. I would be the man who tells you where the ladders are weakest," Tyrion said. "I am an ill thing to love, Lord Stark, and you would be wise never to try. But I can do sums, and I can smell when a room has been swept in a hurry. I know which captains in the watch eat beyond their pay, and which ones send half their wages home to wives who never complain and therefore are dangerous men to corrupt. I know where Littlefinger hides ledgers that could hang him, and I know what my sister will try first, second, and third." Ned looked at the pale scar of the stump where a face had once looked on men and judged them. "If I let you stand beside me, your father will take it for a declaration." "My father takes my breath for a disappointment," Tyrion said dryly. "He will take anything I do for a misdemeanor and anything I fail to do for a felony. But I am telling you a thing he has never once believed. I can count what might be saved and what must be lost, and sometimes I prefer the saving. Catelyn Stark seized you at a roadside inn." "She did," Tyrion agreed, "and I found the Eyrie a poor place to learn how to fly. Yet I do not burn for revenge on a woman who seems to me more loyal than clever. Besides, if you and I would prevent a city from being sacked, it is well to leave off such indulgences for a later day, when the wine is sweeter and the stakes lower."
Ned straightened.
He felt bone ache in his hip, in the spots where a boy's falls had lived quietly and turned into a man's reminders. He looked down at the dwarf and saw, unexpectedly, something like a shard of Winterfell's hard honesty. It was buried and would cut if one reached for it, but it was there. "I will hear your plan," he said. Tyrion tapped the stick, once, as if he had counted to a pleasant number. "First, you will send your daughters away under a flag that makes even the foolhardy think twice. Talk to Barristan Selmy. He still remembers what the white cloak meant. If he walks in front of the litter, with a dozen men of the Kingsguard in full harness, your girls will reach the river without a bump to jostle their dreams." His mouth tilted. "I can arrange that the city learns it is a visit to Seps for pious instruction, if you wish to dull any curious eyes. Barristan is loyal to the crown." "He is loyal to what he thinks the crown ought to be," Tyrion said, "which is both a comfort and a problem. But he will not let harm come to children because a woman with my hair tells him to look elsewhere. And the watch. You will have prepared Janos Slint to remember that he has eaten from golden plates lately. You will also have a name in your mouth when you grow angry with him and say that the watch will have a new commander if this one cannot keep order. Ser Jacelyn Bywater. He will hear that name and think of an iron spine and decide he is, after all, devoted to you." Tyrion flicked his fingers, as if playing a small harp. "At the same time, I will harvest Littlefinger's ledgers. It is not difficult. His clerks are honest and therefore greedy to be praised. His secretaries keep their mistresses' calendars in their heads and their masters' secrets on slips of paper that resemble birdseed. You have already been in his counting house. A poor imp was born to find narrow stairs. Tyrion looked toward the black edge where the gods would change into the world. Before any of this, though, you must decide a thing that will put your soul in pain. When the king dies, you will read his letter aloud in the throne room. It will say that you are protector until his heir comes of age. His voice softened, oddly. You will not say the heir's name. You would have me lie on a dead man's letter. I would have you leave a word unspoken, Tyrion returned. And if you cannot, then speak the name Stannis Baratheon and know that you are drawing a sword. If you say Stannis, say it with 100 men having already been fed and paid and with lances pointed at doorways where Lannister steel will appear. Say it with the bells ready to ring and not ring, and with a door barred at Cersei's back. But do not go into that room with a letter and a prayer and think it will be enough. Ned's hand closed slowly. He thought of another god's wood, darker. The rasp of his father's voice. His brother alive and laughing. He thought of the truth like an icicle, pure and cold and deadly when it fell. I will not name a false heir, he said. Then name no heir at all in that room, Tyrion said. Name a principal. Let the principal live long enough for us to hold the city. Then we will see how loudly the lords sing when Stannis himself stands in the doorway with a fleet behind him. Ned studied his guest for a long time. You speak as if Stannis were a game piece to slide when convenient. I speak as if I know him, Tyrion said. He would prefer to be the rule rather than the man. Give him the rule and he will forgive the indecency that a Lannister stood beside you to keep order in his city. And your sister? She will try to seize the boy, Tyrion said. She will try to put him on the throne with a crown that bites and argue that kings are facts and heretics are not. She will think she commands the watch. She will think she can command Barristan because someone once told her white cloaks are for beauty. His mouth quirks. She will think the world is a string she can pull hard enough to strangle men like you. And when she thinks otherwise, then we will teach the watch to watch, said Tyrion, and he rested both hands atop his walking stick, and the gods would fell to listening. The boar found Robert the next day, in the whispering grove beyond the stone way, when the sun was yellow as a bruised peach, and the king laughed and bled and told dirty stories to trees that would outlast him. Men ran. Ravens watched. The world shifted with the slow care of a great hound settling to sleep, and then jolted and woke. Robert's bedchamber smelled of wine and rushed fear. Ned stood beside the bed and watched a man he had loved who had become a stranger try to be the boy he had been. Robert gripped his hand and scrawled words onto a slate that became parchment, and the quill scratched as if it were a boar's tusk. "Protector," Robert muttered. "You'll do it. Do it right, Ned." His eyes were glass. "Make it right." The letter named Eddard Stark Protector of the Realm until the king's son came of age. Ned laid his hand across the words and swallowed the thing he wanted to do. Strike out son and right heir. He had never in his life altered another man's words. He did not now. He let the ink dry. Cersei stood within the door then, with her hair like a banner, her beautiful lip twisting when she smiled. Tyrion had suggested that Ned use the doors as if they were allies. Leave some ajar, bar some, post men at others. Now he did so. Men moved with purpose. Varys scurried like a man discovering where his feet were, and Littlefinger bowed and smiled as if bows and smiles could not be used as weapons. Pycelle dozed in a chair and woke to say the word leech when asked if the king would live. Renly spoke quietly to his rose-clad shadow and was gone by twilight, with 7 men of his choosing and plans thick enough to choke a September Barristan. Selmy stood and did not blink. At dawn the bells began to toll. They did not stop. The city mourned in the manner of cities, which is to say loudly enough to drown quieter things. When Ned walked into the throne room, his hand a sudden weight upon the pommel at his hip. He had already sent his daughters away. Arya had tried to argue. Sansa had tried to cry. He had put his hand to both their hair and kissed each upon the brow and told them that monsters never slept but men did, and he needed to know they were sleeping safe. Barristan had bowed stiff as ice when Ned asked him to lead the escort. "It is the king's wish that the ladies of his house be honored," Ned had said, holding Robert's letter like a stoneware cup. Barristan had understood. White armor gleamed in the morning. The city watched the river road swallow the litter and did not know what it was seeing. The throne room was a long mouth that had been bent into a sneer. The Iron Throne reclined like a beast that had forgotten how to get to its feet. Lannister guardsmen stood in squares of red, arranged in neat expectations. The city watch held the doors and the steps. Janos Slint dabbed a handkerchief to his lips and saw everything. Cersei came in trailing perfume that sought to hide the cost of it. Joffrey walked behind her, his eyes bright with the joy of being looked at. Tommen waddled, ears pink, anxious to be brave. Myrcella's face was a painting that had learned to breathe. Sandor Clegane loomed like a wall one no one would take the time to plaster. Littlefinger stood beside the dais with hands that took pleasure in seeming idle. Ned stepped forward with the letter in his hand, and the hush rolled back toward him like surf. Varys's breath was a memory of spice. Pycelle's beard shimmered in the lamplight. Barristan stood to the right, and his hands were empty. His stance was not. "The king," Ned said, voice carrying as if winter air had done the work for him, "has left us." The words were a flake of frost that melted as soon as he saw Cersei's eyes. He made himself look away. He left this. He unfolded the parchment. He read the words. He read all but the word he most wanted to speak. He never once said the name of any heir. When he finished, he did not lift the letter high like a bannerman. He held it low as men hold burdens. "The realm will be safeguarded until the lawful heir is confirmed," Ned said. "All good men owe their swords to the law. The law is not a different color when the candlelight changes." Cersei smiled. How pretty. She did not look at Ned when she spoke. She looked past him at the throne. "My son will sit there. The law you speak of has a face, Lord Stark, and it sits 11 feet above every other face in this city." "He is a good boy," Pycelle quavered. "Handsome and..." Barristan's voice cut like a blade being drawn. "He is not of age. Then he will have a protector." Cersei's gaze drifted to the letter in Ned's hand. She moved forward as if the air were a crowd parting to give her way. "May I?" Ned did not hand it to her. Tyrion had told him to use his hands. Hands are as eloquent as tongues. He held the parchment steadily. "You may read," he said, and lowered it enough that she might lean and wish for it without ever touching. She read with the indifferent care of someone counting coin they mean to spend quickly. At the end, she looked up with the expression of a cat who has found a bowl empty and decided the maid should be beaten for the insult. "You have left a word out, Lord Stark." "I have read the letter," Ned said. "As written. It says son. It says heir." The smile widened. "Your northern accent is strange." She looked to the room. "I will correct the diction." She reached. Ned did not pull away. For a moment they stood with the parchment between them like an old marriage that had turned acrid. Then she gripped it and tore. The rip was soft, but it seemed to split the room. The letter fell in pieces like torn skin. Janos Slint inhaled. The city watch faced forward and did not move. Ned had rehearsed the next gesture until it had war grooves in his mind. He did it now. He lifted his right hand and let it fall, and 6 ranks of gold cloaks moved, pikes aligned, shields forward. Sandor Clegane took a half step that died when he saw where the pikes pointed. Littlefinger's laugh was not. "Seize her," Ned said to the watch. His voice was plain oak. "Gently. She will be treated as befits the mother of princes. Seize Ser Lancel Lannister. Seize any man who draws steel in this hall without my word." He turned his head a fraction. "Ser Barristan, attend the princes." White steel and gold steel and red steel took positions that were suddenly no longer hypothetical arrangements on a tabletop. The watch moved well, like men who had been told in simple language what would happen if they moved poorly. Cersei's cheeks bloomed with a color that looked cherubic at a distance and violent up close. "You dare," she whispered. "I must," Ned said. Joffrey made a sound that was meant to be a command and grew into a squawk. "I will have your head," he told Ned. "I am your king. You are a boy." Barristan said, his voice not unkind. A boy well loved, I hope. He placed his hand, not the hand that had killed, but the other, between Joffrey and the nearest watchman, and looked to Ned. And in that look there was a pact made among men who had been bred to die tidily and discovered it is sometimes better to live disgracefully a little longer for the realm's sake. "Do not harm the queen," Ned said again, and the strength in the room altered. Felt like the moment before ice breaks. Frail and vast. Sandor's hand opened. Littlefinger's mouth shut on whatever quip had come to perch. Lancel was pale as wet linen when the guards took him. Cersei did not struggle. She watched. Ned felt her gaze crawl the length of him, cool and contemptuous, counting bones and finding each already paid for. When she was led away, through doors that had been unbarred with the speed of men who had oiled hinges the night before, the throne room let out a breath. Varys's silk sighed with it. Pycelle's lips moved in prayer. Littlefinger smiled at Ned with a kind of gentle reproach that would have bewildered a nation of goats. "My lord," he said, "you have done a thing few men manage. You have made a mourning interesting." "Arrest him," Ned said without looking, and Jory's hand was on Littlefinger's arm before the name finished leaving Ned's mouth. The affronted blink discharged like a quail startled from brush. "For what imagined crime?" Littlefinger asked softly. "For every actual one," Tyrion said, stepping from behind a curtain that had never been able to hide much. His eyes were bright. "We will begin with treason and theft, and if the ledgers I borrowed last night read as true, we will continue to indecency with figures, which is worse." He smiled at Ned as if they had been quarreling about cheese. "Ser Jacelyn sends his regards. He is at the gate of the gods with men who prefer their pikes to point one way." Littlefinger's laughter was like a bracelet dropped onto stone. Small and pretty and not of any use. "You put your faith in accountants and watchmen? I put my faith in the fact that your favorite clerk cannot spell the name of the man you paid to kill a master-at-arms, and so he renders it 3 different ways in one page," Tyrion said pleasantly. "And I put my faith in a city that would rather be fed than flattered." He nodded at Jory. "Take him where the air is poor and the rats have been taught not to speak. There is a sound that big rooms make when the thing that has lived there for years, fear in a particular flavor, flees. It is not loud. It is a change in pressure." Ned heard it then. He put his hand against the stab of bone-deep tiredness that had become his companion since he set foot in the east, and he told himself that it was morning, that the day would lengthen and then end, and that having not sent boys to die for a woman's secret was a sort of breakfast. They kept Cersei in a suite of rooms with sun and shutters. Tyrion had argued for a chamber where she would be comfortable because inaccessible luxury was an argument Tywin Lannister could understand. "If you parade her in rags, he will make a hero of himself while storming a city that did not insult his pride," he had said. "Let him write letters. Letters go on for a long time and kill no one that matters." "Men matter," Ned had said. "Some," Tyrion had agreed, "but not the men who carry Tywin's letters in their bags. We will feed those men biscuits and send them away impressed by our tables." Letters did go, dark birds with hard, urgent wings. Ravens fanned out to Dragonstone and Storm's End, to Sunspear and Riverrun, to Oldtown and Highgarden and the Eyrie. A few found Casterly Rock. Back came stiff replies or none, or rumors with feathers still clinging. Stannis's letter was not long. It named law, it named virtue, it did not name mercy. It did not need to. His man Davos, a smuggler with eyes as honest as bruises, arrived with it, and bowed to Ned with a simplicity that reminded Ned of men who had stood under Winterfell's banners and gone to keep poultices warm for brothers who would not be warm again. "My lord," Davos said, "my king waits only for the wind. Tell him the city waits for his justice. The city also waits for bread," Tyrion murmured under his breath as Davos left, and then aloud, "We should get it for them. Bread is an excellent argument for any regime." So they governed. It is one thing to think of ruling as a clean, straight tool like a sword. It is another to learn it is more like a spoon, turned constantly to keep porridge from burning, occasionally catching at the bottom of the pot. Ned sat in council and discovered that coin was not a number but a river, and the river had been diverted many times so that by the time it reached the sea of the city's needs, it had become a trickle. Tyrion drew a map of debts on the board with chalk that broke and left powder on his fingers. He moved sums like armies. He laughed sometimes, and sometimes his mouth went tight and thin. "Your friend Peter," he said over a pot of ink. He turned these difficulties into delightful knots and then sold both ends of the twine. "He is not my friend," Ned said. Tyrion raised his brows. "No? That is an improvement from the world I expected to be living in this month." They appointed Jacelyn Bywater to the head of the city watch after Ned had scolded Yano Slint for failing to understand his own good fortune. Slint retired to a townhouse that Littlefinger had once altered a ledger to please, and discovered that sleeping on featherbeds did not spare dreams if a man had looked too long at coin he could not keep. Bywater brought discipline to the watch the way men bring buckets to a thatch fire. Early, with more water than pride. He drilled patrols. He posted men at granaries. He had the sort of face that did not look convincing unless it was angry, and so he tried to look angry often. He and Jory found they could speak without wasting breath. Varys hovered between helpfulness and apology, always arranging his hands in such a way that they never seemed empty even when they were. Pycelle wept and then lectured and then slept. Renly's empty chair at the council table became a sort of third participant in the conversations. It suggested who would take the easy way if he were present. Mace Tyrell's ravens were fat with compliments and thin on propositions. Doran of Dorne sent quiet words that said more than praise. He would not move first, but he would not be moved. The Aerie did not answer. Ned thought of Lisa's tremulous mouth and her frightened boy and wished he could love his sister with the ease with which he would command a sword. At night Ned went to the Godswood and tried to sink into the sound of the fountain, which in its best moments could become rain. Often he found he was not alone. Tyrion came there when the hall began to itch. "I speak better to people when a tree is listening," Tyrion said when Ned lifted a brow. "Our trees listen more kindly in the north," Ned said. "Perhaps they are not forced to learn courtesy from septons." Tyrion leaned to touch the water with the tip of his stick. "I have been thinking about your daughters. They are on the river now," Ned said. "Barristan sent word. They took a barge at Rosby and will keep to backwaters. The Kingsguard are with them. Arya will have knocked the shins of at least 2 white knights by now. Sansa will have thanked every leaf on every branch for shading her. You have not told them the truth. I told them as much as they should bear." "Truth is heavy," Tyrion agreed, "and children have narrow shoulders." He glanced toward the walls that concealed Cersei's quiet imprisonment. "My sister will not forgive you for their departure. She thought to keep at least one Stark in a golden cage. She enjoys the chirping. I did not do it to anger her. Yet you did." Tyrion's grin was brief as a cut. "You do many things my sister cannot forgive. The list grows. Send her a comb. It will make her angrier than a dagger. Your father will not forgive either." "Ah," Tyrion said softly. "He never forgave me for being born, so I am slower to count his offenses against my pride. But yes, the old lion yawns, and the rock breathes, and I smell men who have been sharpening their memories of my sister's beauty until they believe themselves chivalrous. What will he do? He will write first, as I said. Then, if we do not answer his letters with humiliation, he will consider writing. He may send Jaime to lead half his host, because it pleases him to believe his sons glow and should be seen. He will not declare his aim. He will speak of restoring order, and then you will have to decide whether you will stand on law like a stone and break horses against you, or whether you will soften the ground under their hooves. Stannis comes, Ned said. I will hold the city for the rightful king. He looked at Tyrion's narrow face. Will you? For the law, yes, Tyrion said. For Stannis the man, hesitatingly. He has no sense that laughter heals bruises. But I prefer order to my sister's caprice, and I prefer your honor to many things I have yet to name. I will help you hold the city. When my father asks me why, I will tell him there was more merit in being useful than ornamental. Ned found a smile. He will not believe you, Belief is an art no Lannister patriarch excels at. When Stannis' sails were at last sighted, pale as teeth against a long, unlovely morning, the city's hum changed. The bells did not ring this time. The bells had rung too long for a drunk king's funeral and a sober queen's anger and the small rebellions of bakers. Men held their breath instead. Stannis came ashore with his jaw set like a decree and his household knights like an accusation. Davos smiled at no one. A red woman in a strange gown remained aboard his flagship and watched with eyes the color of embers that had not yet decided whether to die or flare. In the throne room, where the throne still crouched like a threat but the air was different, now that the watch had learned the geometry of the floor and where the light fell, Stannis stood before Ned with his mouth aseam. He did not sit. "Lord Stark," he said, "you held the city. I kept the law breathing until a man who believes in it could arrive," Ned said. "I do not hold with breathing metaphors." Stannis' gaze flicked to Tyrion and away. "You hold with unusual allies. Better a clever enemy than a foolish friend," Tyrion said amiably. "But in any case, I am neither at the moment." "The Lannisters keep your sister," Stannis observed. "Comfortably," Tyrion said. "The king's justice can be a patient thing when it has bread to bake." Stannis' eyes were a cold coast. "Cersei Lannister bears my brother's bastard on the throne." "She bears her brother's," Ned said simply. He decided that the greatest mercy he could offer the city was to speak it without drama. "There is no doubt." "I never doubted," Stannis said stiffly. "Others did. They preferred a prettier lie." He stepped forward and looked up at the Iron Throne with a longing that was not for the iron but for the order it represented when stripped of men. "We will call a great council. We will show them the truth. We will give them the law, and if they will not take it, we will give them the sword." "We will give them bread first," Tyrion murmured. "Then law, then sword. Men eat before they vote." Stannis' mouth twitched like a man tasting something he had not been promised and finding it tolerable. "Very well," he said. "Bread." So they baked a kingdom. Bakers were paid in coin that did not bounce. Grain was fetched from stores that Littlefinger's numbers had hidden behind clever phrases like anticipated allocation. Tyrion and Varys and Bywater found how to turn the city's hunger into a calendar instead of a riot. The harbor bustled. A few ships flying colors Stannis disliked anchored despite themselves. Their captains discovered that tariffs were like rules of grammar, annoying but civilizing. The Great Council assembled like weather. The High Septon waddled forth with rings that chimed when he scratched himself. Mace Tyrell arrived smiling and sweating. His daughter's suitors jumped like fish before his gate. Doran of Dorne did not come but sent his brother Oberyn, whose smile was new-spun silk over iron filaments. The Riverlands came with their lord convalescing from his last quarrel with breathing. Hoster Tully's men spoke loud to compensate, and Sansa Tully's brother wrote letters with careful strokes that looked like blades laid in order. The Vale sent no errand. Lisa sent a letter that spoke of forgiving harm no one had asked forgiveness for. Robb Stark did not come, was too young, and his mother sent the weight of her name instead. The Ironborn were wind and rumor. The North's few lords in the city stood stiff. The Reach's second sons stood smooth. Men filled the hall with crests and private expectations. The matter, once said, was simple. Stannis' books were simple. His proofs were not passionate. Pycelle was compelled to remember that wisdom did not always mean quibbling. Varys spoke lightly, then less lightly, then silently. He was, in all his affable manner, a man who could be stopped by conviction when it had proper escorts. Littlefinger was not there to purr. Barristan stood and bore witness in that his body had stood in rooms where rot had set in and refused to leave. The High Septon blessed the truth in a mutter because at last even the faith dared not claim that the stranger had fathered and mothered the same child at the same time. Renly came in green and gold with shadows of roses at his shoulders and a speech that was all charm and arithmetic. "A realm is a garden," he said. "We water what grows. The people love me. They will love the peace I bring." He did not say he was younger brother to a king with less sweetness than an onion. He did not need to. The words were in the air like a perfume someone else had applied. Stannis' answer was a ledger. "The law says," he repeated, as men do when habits have become prayer. The law admits no gardens. It admits the truth and the strength to carry it. The hall swayed. Mace Tyrell watched the sway like a man who judges a dance and is eager for applause. Oberyn wore boredom like silk and smiled at Tyrion with too many teeth. Ned listened and said little. He had brought his name and the weight of it. He had brought the city's brief peace, which is a stronger argument than 1,000 scrolls when it is fresh. When the vote came, it was less a vote than a settling. The High Septon mumbled. Mace Tyrell preened and hedged, and in the end hedged toward caution. Highgarden will stand where the law stands, as befits faithful men. Many lords noticed the river of bread that had flowed in the last fortnight. Davos's modest honesty worked on men who had grown sick of being impressed by swans. The Riverlands thought of their daughters and the taste of Lannister iron. The Reach thought of their sons and the Lannister gold that might not gleam so kindly if asked to die for a boy with a sweet smile. The Braavosi factor offered a note about debts that might yet be honored, and that was a drumbeat many heard with their feet. Stannis Baratheon was acclaimed king. He bowed to the throne the way a soldier bows to a weapon he mistrusts, and then took the oaths like a man visiting a sept because an honest friend asked him to. Then the questions began. How to keep the Lannisters from turning the trident red. How to keep Renly from making gardens grow into armies. How to keep the Dornish from smiling until the rest of the realm bled enough to satisfy old ghosts. How to keep bread flowing, the fleet sound, the watch loyal. Tyrion attended those questions with a fox's focus. Give the rock something it does not expect, he said. Give it grace. He glanced at Ned. Send my sister back. No, Stannis said at once, the word a hammer. We will send her to the rock, Tyrion continued, as if speaking to himself. She will be guarded, of course, in a way that allows my father his dignity. Her children. Those are not the king's children, Stannis snapped. They will be held to answer. They will be held to be cherished because they are innocent, Ned said flatly. We will not hang children for the sins of their parents. Stannis's eyes traveled to him and stayed. If the law does not say to kill those who did not choose their blood, Ned said. It says to punish perjury and treason. Cersei shall be tried. Ser Jaime will be summoned to answer. But if you cut Tommen, the realm will not call you just. It will call you murderer, and it will be right. Tyrion's head tipped. There is, besides, another solution. Betrothments. I suggest uniting what must be united if any of us is to sleep this year. You will not. Stannis began and then stopped. Speak. Shireen Baratheon, Tyrion said. To Tommen, when they both come of age. The boy is of no fault. Your daughter is... He hesitated in un-Lannister fashion. She is gentle. The realm loves gentle girls who wear crowns. It makes small folk believe they can still sing. He focused on Ned now, as if the next part would taste better said to Stark ears. And send Myrcella to Dorne for fostering, or better, betroth her to Prince Trystane, as the late queen once arranged. Dornish pride is soothed best where a child and a future are concerned. They will watch her closely and call it kindness. Those children are not of Robert's blood, Stannis said again, quieter. They are of ours, Tyrion said without flourish. Mine and my sister's, to our shame, but also our responsibility. I will answer for them. Let them be useful instead of dead. And Joffrey, Stannis asked. Joffrey we send to the rock with his mother, Tyrion said. There he may grow as men do when they are denied audiences, smaller in their own imagination, larger in their tutors' pockets. He will have the use of a library and a castle and the certain knowledge that if he leaves either, he will be met by men with ropes and a letter with the royal seal. Ned imagined it. The boy's bright cruelty cut off from a city he could torment. Tywin's rage forced into the shape of patience. Cersei pacing in rooms where no one would risk laughing at her. It felt like giving the storm a valley to rage in and not a city. Tywin will not accept this, Stannis said. He will accept something that leaves him hope to play again, Tyrion said. He does not love his daughter enough to die for her. He loves his name too well to see it broken entirely. He will fold now to draw later. You know your father, Ned said. Yes, Tyrion said distantly. Unfortunately, the council argued for hours. In the end, as with many clever ideas that are also decent, it survived not because all present found it appealing, but because each found it less appalling than the alternatives. Oberyn's smile took on a new flavor: anticipation. Mace Tyrell declared it prudent, a word he enjoyed because he thought it made him look thinner. The North's men were content to see no Stark blood spilled over a Lannister boy's neck. The Faith blessed the mercy as if it had been their idea. Cersei received the news with a calmness that made Ned respect her nerve, though he could not respect what she used it for. She listened in rooms where sun warmed floorboards, ran her finger once along the edge of a table, and then looked up at Tyrion. You will bring me to Father to be caged in his mercy. I will bring you to Father, Tyrion said. He will choose his mercy. And you think I will go like a bird? I think you will go like a lioness whose cubs have been parceled out in ways she cannot claw, Tyrion said. You will go because you know the alternative is worse, and you will test every wall and every guard and find that your brother's honor is of less use to you than you dreamed. She looked then to Ned. I could say I hate you, Cersei said, but the truth is more awkward. I despise you. It is a colder thing. It lasts longer. I believe you, Ned said. I prefer your despising to your grieving. She laughed once very quietly. You are insufferable. They sailed at dusk, a small flotilla that did not announce itself as a royal train. Tyrion went, because he had told the council that Tywin wanted a Lannister to look in his face while saying the terms, and a Stark would look like insult. Ned remained, because the city needed a steady gaze and because he refused to be where he might see Cersei lift her chin like a coin, and think of all the men who had died for that gesture and all those who had not, and would be remembered the less for it. He stood on the ramparts of Aegon as the sun put copper into the river's skin and watched until the sails were smudges. Bywater's men paced. The wind pulled his hair as it did when he was a boy and the tower roared with winter. He closed his eyes and could feel winter there still, and for a moment he smiled. When Tyrion returned, weeks later, he looked like a man who had walked across a chessboard that was on fire and had kept the kings alive by counting squares while his boots burned. He reported to the council, then came to the Godswood after. He did not ask to be alone. He trusted to the leaves to make privacy. We dined, he said. Father did not throw his goblet because goblets are expensive and temper is a luxury gentleman cannot always afford. What did he say? He said what he always says, Tyrion said, that the name must endure, that loyalty is written in contracts and paid for in land. He said a son who takes the city's side against his father is an unnatural creature. I said a father who makes it necessary is unnatural first. He did not like that. He shrugged so lightly it hurt to watch. He agreed. He will hold his hand, for now. He will kiss Joffrey's brow and tell him that patience is a hunter's virtue and sometimes kings must become hunters. He will write letters that will flatter men who don't care to be flattered. He will feed his pride into the bank of later, and then he will begin to look for later. And Jaime, Ned said softly. Tyrion looked at the stump of the heart tree as if he were mirroring Ned's habit without mocking it. Jaime laughed when he learned he was called to answer. He laughed because he does not know any other response to danger that he cannot leap at with a blade. He will stay away. I think he is hunting himself. It is an odd sport, but he is made strangely. Ned had no answer for that. He thought of a man he had seen once through torchlight and hate, a kingslayer and a boy at once. He pushed the memory away. Dorne? He asked. Dorne smiles, Tyrion said, in several different flavors. Myrcella looks well in their son already. She is her mother's daughter and not. She looks at people the way a cat looks at a high shelf. I think she will learn to climb. His tone held a tenderness he did not show often. Their prince with the spear smiles like men who have not yet forgiven. He mentioned a sister we all agree should have lived. I told him the only way I knew how to honor dead women was to make live ones safe. He told me to try, then. You are trying, Ned said. Yes, Tyrion said. For once. The city, like a wrestler who has been thrown and chooses to get up rather than lie, found a new motion. Men learned to hold their tongues when their tongues wanted to gossip about the color of king's hair. The Watch found that men who had been fed were easier to shepherd. The docks became a polite argument between tariff and cooperation. The guilds discovered that the master of coin was not a charming thief but a whoremonger of numbers who could make a ledger blush and a debt come due without theatrics. Tyrion shut down 3 of Littlefinger's farms of profit, and then reopened one with precise rules that made men howl and then sit down and actually read. Stannis, to no one's surprise, was relentless. He was, to almost everyone's surprise, sometimes just. He listened to Davos as a man listens to a map in a storm. He listened to Ned more than to anyone else, because he suspected that Ned did not know how to lie well. They argued. They had different ideas of what a kingdom should praise. They learned to live in the same room. Stannis did not learn to laugh, but he learned to hold his tongue until after sunset when he would go to his study and say things to Candleflame that candles did not choose to change. One evening, the wall sent a raven. It came hesitant and smudged with cold, as if the ink had shivered. Maester Aemon's thin hand had written the lines. They spoke of wildlings moving in numbers, of a long quiet that was not peace, of shadows seen where shadows should not be. Ned read it twice and did not look up immediately, because he did not wish the room to see his face before his face learned the trick of serenity again. Tyrion took the letter delicately, not like a man holding gossip, but like a man taking a knife by its hilt and not its blade. "I have seen that sky," he said. "It is honest. I prefer honest danger. It tends not to flatter before it kills you." "We will send men," Ned said. Stannis nodded as if he had been expecting this only in a different order than his day had offered him. "We will send men," he said. "The Night's Watch is the realm's hard edge. It has been allowed to dull." He looked to Tyrion. "Find coin." Tyrion sighed. "I had planned to spend the week teaching the master of ships to count without moving his lips." "Very well," he said. "I will locate funds. The crown's debt to the Watch is a stretch of years. I will try as payment something novel, honor." "Honor is not a coin," Stannis said. "But men who have some will take less coin to stand where they must," Tyrion returned. "And men who have none will take the coin and go anyway. We will use both kinds, as the gods use saints and rogues." Ned went to the godswood after that. He walked under the whittled leaves. He wanted to write to Robb to come south, and then he wanted to tell him to stay away and grow into a lord under gray skies with hounds. He wanted to send 100 men to the wall and then 500, and then he wanted to go himself. He could not. He was hand. The duty had him by the throat like a collar that fit too well to be cut. He sensed Tyrion before he saw him. The dwarf moved lightly as a man with a bad leg can. He came to stand beside Ned without ceremony, which was its own kind of ceremony. "You looked as if you'd heard news of a cousin's death," Tyrion said. "I may have," Ned said. "I may have heard of strangers' deaths and treated them as kin." "That is your trouble," Tyrion said softly. "It will, perhaps, be the realm's salvation." Ned let out a long breath. "I should like it to be my children's salvation. The realm may survive many things, but I have not many sons to spare." "You have 2, Tyrion said. "The elder will be a lord. The younger will be something no one expected. You have 2 girls. One sees a world she wants to believe in, and one sees the world as it is and wants to fight it. Between them, they may yet make a man of some prince they meet." "I sent them away," Ned said. "To make a man of you," Tyrion said. "It appears to be working." He grinned then, and it was a quick, clean thing that did not hide bruises or make apology for them. Ned found himself smiling in answer. They stood that way for a space, 2 men in a too-tidy garden in a city that always wanted to eat itself. The fountain made a sound like rain. Renly, emboldened by Highgarden's son and some lesser men's impatience, declared himself king at Storm's End and began to gather men as boys gather pebbles on a beach, delighted by the sound they make in the pocket. Stannis's jaw tightened until it seemed it would crack. He planned war the way some men plan weddings, with careful attention to the order in which silk and steel must appear. Ned dissuaded him from marching at once. "You have a city that does not love you yet," he said. "You have a law that needs time to look like more than your will. You have a wall that needs men who will not run when dark shapes move." "I have a brother who mistakes charm for right," Stannis said. "You have a brother who can be outlasted if you feed his allies' doubts faster than you feed his pride," Tyrion offered. "Send ravens to Highgarden, to the Reach's lesser lords, promising that a king who believes in tithes will not require them to dance for their rents. Send an envoy to the Stormlands with a troop that looks like you believe in numbers more than banners. Announce that your crown will pay debts first. The realm will notice." "The realm has noticed bread," Ned said. "Yes," Tyrion said. "Bread without taxes tastes like a miracle. They made the miracle last as long as they could. Men will always find cause to quarrel, but if their bellies are willing to be patient, their swords are too." The months stretched. The small folk learned that the new king sent cartloads of grain north as if the world had lengthened. The north learned that Southrons had discovered winter was not a fairy tale to frighten children. A letter came from Robb written in clean, strong lines that suggested Winterfell stone had taught his hand to lay weight even upon ink. "Mother sends her love," it read, "and she sends this also. Remember that an honest man is not a blunt man. Be as hard as you are. Be no harder than you must." Ned folded it carefully and looked out at a city whose smell he had begun to distinguish rather than reject. It was still a stew, but he could say onion here, tanner there, the sweet of flowers from some high window, the river's stale breath from the east. It was not Winterfell. It was the place he had chosen to plant some piece of his honor and see if it would grow south of a weirwood's comfort. Tyrion came to him with news like a coin that had been shined too hard. Renly's host had met Stannis' vanguard outside Bitterbridge and had not engaged. They had circled. They had feinted. They had sent letters that would later be read as jokes or treasons depending on the reader. The Tyrells had not chosen, and then they had, when Stannis announced to the realm that the faith would be restored to its proper place beside the crown. Respectfully, with certain old rites renewed. It was a sop to Mace Tyrell's sense of dignity and to the High Septon's vanity. It was a law Stannis could bear because he liked hierarchies where men climbed or did not with bruised knees. "Highgarden will lean to the man who sent it respect with his signature," Tyrion said. "Renly will find that gardens sometimes close their gates." "He is dangerous even when he loses," Ned said. "Yes," Tyrion said. "So are we all." Letters from across the narrow sea trickled in like a rumor trying to be prophecy. A young woman with silver hair had not been killed by wine. A young woman with silver hair had walked into a fire and walked out with dragons. A young woman with silver hair had bought an army, lost an army, freed a city, married a Sellsword, married a prince, married a dream. Ned read each version as if it were the wind. He could not feel it on his face yet. He did not doubt that one day he would. He hoped his daughters would be far from it when it blew. He hoped his sons would be men who met it standing. It was a life of pages and tables and arguments that were polite because their edges were sharp, of small triumphs, like boats that came in on time, of small defeats, like rumors that could not be killed. It was unexpectedly a life of talk with a man he had once thought he would despise. "You have not asked me why I do what I do," Tyrion said one evening when the gods' wood was blue with dusk and a bat circled the open sky like a tremor. "I have watched," Ned said. "And what have you decided?" "That you do not like to be helpless," Ned said. "That you will step between a fool and a catastrophe if only to prove to yourself that you are capable of it. That you do not believe in virtue, but you believe in the uses of virtuous men." Tyrion laughed softly. "And what do you think of my father? I think he will never forgive either of us." "For not being him," Tyrion said. "But then, who could? There is only one Tywin Lannister. Like there is only one North and one Winter that comes when it wants." He tapped his stick on the pavers. "I do not know if I will be remembered for this. I do not know if I want to be. But I know that when I die, I will prefer to have done at least one thing that made it harder for my sister to ruin a city." "That is a sort of honor," Ned said. "It is a sort of stubbornness," Tyrion replied, grinning. "We are cousins in that." Sansa wrote from the Trident and then from White Harbor, letters filled with careful handwriting and the scent of northern soap when the wax warmed in his hands. Arya's letters were shorter and came less often. She wrote of a water dancer with a wooden sword, and then she wrote of learning to put her toes on bricks to reach the alley's top if dogs chased her. He did not show those to Catelyn. He kept them in his breast and felt them like thin plates of steel. He dreamed sometimes of a hallway and little feet running away from something he could not see. He woke and went to the godswood and laid his palm against a carved stump that had no face and spoke to gods he was not certain were listening. He found that it is better to speak even when one is not sure one is heard. It keeps the voice from rusting. Winter's edge approached. The wall's requests grew calmer, which was not comforting. Calm can be a slow surrender. Stannis sent men in companies and then in dozens. Davos organized it as a man organizes a market with schedules and patience. Tyrion found money that had not existed until he invoked the phrase royal prerogative, and looked a Bravosi factor in the eye until the man remembered that reneging on a loan is a sport everyone can play if no one is punished for it. The East sat like a cat by a fire and dozed. Its claws were sheathed, but they had not been cut. Ned and Tyrion stood on the ramparts again as autumn made a knife of the wind. "Do you ever miss it?" Tyrion asked. "Miss what?" "Not being this." Tyrion gestured toward the city, the palace, the weight. "You were a lord who did not have to wear a court like a shirt turned inside out." "I miss ignorance," Ned said. "Sometimes, when I did not know what some men's smiles meant, when I did not know what it cost to feed a city, when I did not know how much I could do that helped and how much did not." He put his hands upon the stone. "I do not miss believing that doing what is right makes the world simplify around you. The world does not simplify. We do not get cleaner swords." "No," Tyrion agreed. He leaned on the parapet and looked like a goblin on a shelf in a child's tale, one of the helpful ones that were never really so helpful. "We get better balances, perhaps. Or worse, we get the comfort of choosing which part of the mess we will own." "You and I chose the same part," Ned said. "We did," Tyrion said. "And you keep telling yourself it is the law, and I keep telling myself it is the city. Between us, we may have enough truth to get us to winter. And after, I suppose we stack our truth against dragons," Tyrion said lightly. Ned looked at him. "You think she lives?" "I think the world enjoys stories that insult our sense of probability," Tyrion said. "And I think that if a girl with silver hair has dragons, the realm will soon have fewer good nights. Then we prepare." "Yes," Tyrion said. "We build a realm that is not so brittle a breath can break it. We teach it to live on oats when wine runs short. We teach men that a king who counts his own coin is less likely to demand theirs. We teach them that when the dead walk, if they do, men of the South and the North bleed the same." Ned was silent. Then, "You would fight for the living." "I would fight against boredom," Tyrion said, and then, because he had learned honesty in careful doses, "I would fight for a chance to prove to my father that he miscounted me." "Your father will not be the judge," Ned said. "If winter comes, the judgment will not be in any man's hands." "Ah," Tyrion said softly. "The old gods, then." "Or no gods at all," Ned said. "But something that does not care for our pride." Tyrion laughed. "How rude of it." They turned from the parapet and walked the long, echoing corridors with their shadows stretched before them like questions. Men bowed. Women looked up quickly and then down. Somewhere a servant sang a song that in the north would have been sung by a fire with a hound's head on a knee. Here it sounded different, some essential thing altered by the air. They came again, as they often did, to the little godswood. It was a bare place to end in, and that made it fit. Tyrion touched the water again with his stick, and the surface shivered. Ned set his palm upon the weirwood stump and found that it had warmed to the sun and held that warmth. The city noises had begun to flatten into evening. Far off, the river said its thousand small nothings to the bank. Somewhere down in the warren, a child laughed and then cried. The sound made Ned's heart do both. "You were right," he said quietly. "About Tyrion's eyes were fitted to the dusk. "About ladders," Ned said, "and about stewards. A tower falls without one." Tyrion's laugh was a brief bell. "You were right, too. That is the worst of it." "How?" "That there are some things one cannot achieve by cunning alone," Tyrion said, and his mouth twisted. "I hate that, but I have learned it." Ned looked at him. "You are a better man than your family deserves." Tyrion's face went still, not because he minded the compliment, but because after a life of needing to pretend he did not know what to do with one that he wanted. He bowed his head. "I am a better man because I stand beside one who refuses to be worse," he said. "Do not move." Ned did not. He felt the old gods, if they were here, say nothing, and in that silence there was a kind of assent. The fountain kept on with its small work beside the laziness of every river. The city did not stop being itself. Neither did they. Night came, and they kept it at bay for another day, and then for another. They held the realm like men who are stubborn rather than strong, and sometimes that is enough. The letters went and came. The watch climbed and shivered and climbed again. The king frowned and signed and argued, and then, once, when the hall had emptied and he and Ned were alone, he said, "Thank you." And the words sounded like someone else's and his own, both. Cersei's anger did not sleep. Tywin's patience did not cease. Renly's gardens kept being watered, and some men kept dying in corners of the map that no bells marked. But the orphans in Fleabottom had bred more days than not, and the knife fights in the alley between the Tanner's Lane and the Weave Hall became fewer. Men who had never believed in law began to consider liking it. Women whose lives had been a string of bargains found they could end the string in their own rooms and lock the door. Ned wrote to Winterfell and to the Wall, and to sons he had not seen become men, and to daughters he hoped would become themselves. Tyrion wrote to no one he loved, because that is a category that had never opened for him without teeth. They worked. It is not glorious work. It is not the stir of banners. It is a hand in ink and a foot in a stirrup and a tongue that must say the same sensible thing 100 times. It is a man with honor and a man with wit, standing where each would not choose to stand, and finding that together their view is better than either would have from his preferred window. It is, sometimes, enough to keep a city from devouring its young. When winter's first true wind came down the Blackwater and pressed its palm against the Red Keep, Ned and Tyrion stood again where they had stood the first night and every night since, when the weight required a ritual to bear it. The garden rustled. The stump did not look away. The moon was a shard. "This will end badly," Tyrion said. Not sadly, but as if he were admitting that dawn will insist upon itself. "All things end," Ned essay. "ID. If we have chosen well until they do, then afterward men may find it harder to choose badly." Tyrion nodded. "A poor epitaph," he said, "yet better than being called charming." Ned actually laughed, and the sound startle-hopped across the pool and came back thinner. He turned his head and looked down at Tyrion, not as a lord at a lesser, but as a man at the other half of a sentence he had never expected to need. "I invited you to rule beside me," he said. "I do not repent it. You invited me to keep you honest and to make your enemies choose daggers that fit their hands poorly," Tyrion said. "But I accept your poetry." He raised his stick in a little salute. "I am, after all, a Lannister who knows his debt." "Pay it then," Ned said, and put his hand to the stump as a man does when he leaves a prayer in wood. Not because the wood will remember, but because he will. They left the gods' wood together. Behind them the fountain whispered and the leaves shifted. The road ahead was not straight. They walked it anyway, as men do when their feet have nothing better to do than make a better line than the map had drawn before. The realm did not love them. It did not have to. It merely had to last. In the work of making it last, the honor of the North and the wit of the West stood side by side, and it turned out that sometimes that is how walls are built, and sometimes that is how winter is met, and sometimes that is how stories are told.